Hey guys, tonight we're sliding into a world so precise, so obsessively choreographed, that even your pants weren't safe from scrutiny. Imagine the year is 1874. You wake up not to an alarm clock, but to the subtle clink of a coal scuttle, the creak of your valet's shoes, and the faint hiss of a pressed kettle preparing steam for something far more important than tea. Your trousers. Yes, your trousers. Because you, dear listener, are a Victorian gentleman. And nothing, not diplomacy, not posture, not even punctuality, matters quite as much this morning as not creasing the sharply ironed pleats of your woolen trousers. The stakes. Your reputation, your respectability, and your entry into polite society. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch beneath a mountain of horsehair stuffed bedding, but you don't swing your legs over the side just yet. You must wait for your valet, because placing your feet directly onto the floor is uncouth, especially when the delicate architecture of the trouser leg must not be disturbed. Your valet knocks, enters with barely a sound, and begins the dance of morning preparation. He retrieves the trousers from their overnight resting place. No mere hook or hanger, but a shaped wooden clamp lined with felt, suspended like a fragile relic from a dedicated trouser rail. The trousers, folded along their central crease, have slept better than you. They're gently steamed by proximity to a ceramic warming jug overnight. Not too hot, mind you, just enough warmth to coax the fibers into obedience. Historians still argue whether the preferred steam source was warm brick, baked clay, or merely a well-placed copper kettle. Your shirt and cravat may be flounced and fussed with later, but right now, all attention is on those tailored tubes of dignity. Your valet lays them flat across a narrow padded bench, brushing off imaginary lint, pressing gently with his hands, whispering coaxing affirmations. "There, sir," he murmurs, "more to the wool than to you." Victorian trousers, especially for gentlemen of standing, are cut slim and long, designed to suggest a man of lean stature, upright morals, and uninterrupted verticality. Creases are intentional, sharp enough to slice air. A fold in the wrong place? Unforgivable. An accidental wrinkle behind the knee? Catastrophe. Your feet are now in slippers. No risk of dragging the hem. Your shirt has drawn on without disturbing your arms, which remain limp, as though you are a Victorian marionette being dressed by angels. Trousers come last. A slow step into the leg holes. One at a time, never rushed. Your valet lifts the waistband, pauses to make sure the hang is clean, then secures the buttons. No belt here, of course. Braces are applied with solemnity. They're not just functional, they're architectural, holding the trousers aloft in graceful suspension, away from the inevitable crease-inducing friction of knees, chairs, or, heaven forbid, a poorly positioned saddle. If you think this sounds fussy, remember, trousers were not yet mass-produced. These were bespoke, often from Savile Row, and cost a week's wages for the average worker. You didn't just own trousers, you cultivated them. A small mirror leans in the corner. You examine yourself, not for facial hair or posture, but for symmetry of fabric. Is the hem pooling unevenly at the ankle? Did the wool respond well to last night's steaming? Or does it appear to be in a mood? You turn slowly, a quarter step at a time, watching how the trousers fall, how they catch the light. You flex one leg, not fully, just enough to test the resilience of the crease. Good. It holds. You are ready to face the day. Your valet disappears to arrange your hat and gloves. You remain standing, still as a statue, because sitting is dangerous. It's too early to tempt the gods of friction. Historians still debate whether this level of care was universal among the gentry, or merely the obsession of the uppermost dandified tier. But evidence from personal diaries, tailors' notebooks, and endless etiquette manuals suggests that at least among aspirational circles, a crisp pair of trousers was considered proof of inner discipline. If your legs looked sharp, so must your mind, and so you move toward the door, pausing just long enough for your valet to brush a last invisible speck from your calf. The trousers whisper as you walk. You do not strut. You do not lounge. You glide. Because glidable posture minimizes friction and delay, and because your trousers have been prepped like the sails of a royal yacht. Outside, the city awaits. The clatter of hooves, the shouts of vendors, the smell of coal smoke curling into the pale sky. But none of that matters yet. What matters is that your legs are encased in clean, smooth wool, not a wrinkle in sight. For now, you descend the staircase with the solemn care of a man walking on polished ice in tight trousers that dare not fold. Each step is its own calculation. Your knee must bend, but not too far. The weight shift must be fluid, not abrupt. Think less, man going to breakfast, and more heron stalking prey across a reflecting pool. At the base of the stairs waits the dressing mirror. Tall, oval, framed in dark walnut, and always slightly judgmental. You pause. Turn to your left, then right. Examine your trousers in profile. Not bad. The creases, like solemn declarations, remain intact down the front of both legs. It is, in this moment, an unspoken victory. Now comes the sitting dilemma. Breakfast will be served soon in the front dining room. And the chair, the chair, is upholstered and somewhat unforgiving. The last time you allowed yourself to sit fully, back against the support and legs at a comfortable angle, you stood to find a diagonal crease had migrated across your thigh like a rebellious railway line. So today, like most days, you will opt for what you and your valet refer to as the hovering perch. You approach the chair. You lower yourself slowly, not into it, but onto its very edge, as though it might be made of wet paint. Your knees remain slightly elevated, your back self-supported, and your coat unbuttoned to prevent pulling. This is not relaxation. This is performance art. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with uncreased trousers was rooted more in fashion, propriety, or the unspoken anxiety of the rising middle class trying to mimic old money poise. The truth is probably all three, stitched together like a bespoke inseam, equal parts elegance, fear, and very itchy wool. At the breakfast table, the newspaper awaits. You reach for it cautiously, not because of its contents, likely politics, scandal, and weather, but because unfolding anything in your lap risks creasing the very fabric you've so carefully preserved. You spread the paper on the table instead. Much safer. Meanwhile, the footman brings tea, eggs, toast, and a single grilled tomato, arranged with the kind of balance that suggests someone has a personal vendetta against asymmetry. You eat daintily. You lean forward only when absolutely necessary, and then from the hips, not the waist. This is known as the hinge method, a common tactic among the crease-conscious. Fork to mouth, sip of tea, quick eye to trouser line. Your attention oscillates rhythmically. You're not reading the news, you're reading your knees. To your right, the house cat, Mr. Marzipan, leaps onto a side table and eyes your lap with the predatory calculation of one who doesn't understand fashion. You shift the toast closer to your plate. He purrs, perhaps mockingly. You do not pet him. You cannot risk a cat nap, and certainly not cat hair. After breakfast, your valet meets you at the hallway arch with a discreet nod. The morning's engagements begin. A walk, perhaps, or a short ride in the carriage. You'll be stopping by the club, maybe popping into the haberdashers to inspect their new line of collar stiffeners. But first, one last crease check. You step into the butler's pantry, not to sneak a crumpet, but to stand before a narrow, full-length mirror tucked between shelves of polished silverware. You examine the situation. Still crisp. Slight flexing around the back of the knee, but no fatal lines. You brush a wrinkle that isn't there, just to assert dominance. Now, finally, the matter of walking outdoors. This is where the real challenge lies. Pavement is uneven, and weather is unpredictable. There could be puddles, horse droppings, breezes that press fabric against limbs in compromising ways. You've brought your walking stick today, not for balance, but for spacing. A good walking stick allows you to gesticulate at dangers from a safe distance. It also discourages acquaintances from initiating arm-in-arm strolls, which always lead to bunching. You take a moment at the front door, hand resting on the polished brass knob. Outside, the world awaits. A swirl of soot, gossip, and impolite curbstones. But inside these trousers, there is calm, there is precision, there is purpose. You step outside and begin the day's journey. Every movement is calibrated. Your pace is measured not in strides, but in swishes. You pass a pair of boys kicking a hoop down the lane and give them a look that says, "One day you too may live in fear of sitting." One of them kicks the hoop toward your leg. You sidestep it without breaking rhythm. The crease holds. Barely. And with that, you continue on, still upright, still smooth, still victorious. For now. The street you walk down is lined with uneven cobblestones, slick from last night's drizzle, and peppered with things a gentleman's trousers were never meant to encounter. Puddles, stray leaves, and the occasional over-enthusiastic dog. Your boots, polished to a black mirror sheen, navigate the terrain with practiced grace. But of course, you're not walking for exercise. You're walking for balance, for crease control, for trousers. The thing most people don't appreciate, people with casual trousers, elastic waists, and devil-may-care knees, is that once the crease breaks, you don't just lose a line. You lose the whole look. You become lopsided, untrustworthy. A man with a sagging front fold might as well have sagging morals, at least in the silent language of 19th century fashion, which is why, a few streets into your walk, you take a detour. Not for coffee. No Victorian gentleman would dare slurp anything from a paper cup. But for a visit to your tailor's second-floor shop. Not because you need anything new, but because he has something you do. The pressing table. You climb the stairs carefully, favoring your right leg as it bends more politely. The door opens to the quiet scent of scorched wool and chalk. Your tailor, Mr. Langley, greets you with a nod that carries years of silent judgment. He gestures toward the back, where the pressing table awaits. Long, narrow, and padded with layers of flannel, stretched tight across a heat-safe board. Here is where the secret magic happens. Laid flat on the table, your trousers are brushed gently with a camel hair brush. Then comes the hot brick, wrapped in muslin, freshly removed from a small iron stove that looks more like something for torturing secrets than pressing garments. The brick is run slowly along the inside crease line, pressing out any whisper of disruption. You watch, hands behind your back, as Langley moves with the reverence of a man ironing the wings of angels. Historians still argue whether the use of hot bricks began as a wartime necessity, when coal was rationed and irons were hard to come by, or if it was always a bespoke affectation passed down in gentlemanly circles like a well-worn joke. Either way, the technique survived, stubborn as a starch stain. Langley replaces the brick with a wooden clapper, essentially a block of polished timber, and pounds the crease into crisp submission. Each knock echoes with the sound of authority. The trousers do not fight back. They learn their place. You think briefly of doing this at home, but remember the time you scorched your own trouser cuff trying to improvise with a kettle and the base of a curling iron. Best leave it to professionals. Langley steps back. You re-don the trousers, stepping into them with theatrical delicacy, lifting each leg as though entering holy ground. You fasten the braces and smooth your hands down your thighs. Beautiful. The crease returns like an old friend, slender, straight, and stern. You leave the shop 10 minutes later and re-enter the street. The walk continues. Now, thanks to Langley's intervention, you are reset, recentered. The trousers gleam faintly in the morning sun like disciplined soldiers. You nod to a passing gentleman who nods back, both of you giving the secret once-over glance at the other's crease. It holds. So does yours. On your way toward the park, you pass a small square where a group of artists are sketching street scenes. You slow slightly, aware that your silhouette may be immortalized. You extend one leg as you walk, letting the crease fall straight, clean as a blade. A bit theatrical? Yes, but trousers this fine deserve to be seen in motion. You pause at a shop window displaying something called a trouser stand, a new invention promising to hold your trousers upright when not in use, as though they are meditating. You make a mental note to inquire later. Meanwhile, a side street beckons, the kind with fewer carriages, less noise, and, most importantly, cleaner footpaths. You take it. The buildings are a little older here, and one smells strongly of boiled mutton, but the pavement is friendly to wool. You pass a retired colonel walking a dog so fluffy it looks like a feather duster on legs. The dog brushes your ankle, but you pivot just in time. It's a narrow escape. The crease is intact. You recall the last time you let your guard down. A picnic, of all things. Sitting cross-legged on the grass like some sort of pantless savage. It took your valet hours to undo the damage, and even then, one leg never quite returned to its former dignity. You eventually donated the trousers to your cousin who, bless him, wears them while gardening. There's a bench ahead, invitingly placed beneath a blossoming cherry tree. You eye it longingly, your calves quietly aching from the effort of hovering just above all morning. But you know better. You'll stand. You remain standing beneath the cherry tree, gazing not just at the petals, but at the angle of sunlight against your trousers. The pink blossoms drift down in a lazy floral snow, and one lands, light as air, on your thigh. You don't brush it off. That would be too sudden, too risky. You let it sit there like a decorative accent, a natural endorsement of your composure. The bench nearby is made of wrought iron with wooden slats. You've sat on one like it before. You remember the betrayal. The slats left ridges across your trousers like poorly done pleats. You stood up looking like an accordion, and the sound your valet made when he saw the damage haunts you to this day. This is why, in certain circles, it was said that only fools and Frenchmen sit between breakfast and supper. Now, of course, no one would say that out loud. But the sentiment lingers in the way gentlemen hover. And so you do, adjusting your posture, shifting your weight from foot to foot like a statue being gently rotated by time. You lean ever so slightly on your walking stick. It helps relieve pressure on your knees, which are starting to question your life choices. But still you stand. The real question is, why was sitting such a threat? To understand, you must first consider the design of Victorian trousers. Unlike modern pants, which are tailored with generous blends and forgiving seams, the trousers of your era are cut from stiff wool or worsted cloth. They are engineered not for movement, but for form. The moment you bend too deeply, the fabric resists, and resistance leads to puckering. Puckering leads to bunching, and bunching leads to the abyss. This is where furniture comes in. As a man of means, Your home contains chairs built to accommodate your fashion. The dressing stool, the dining perch, the fireplace bench with angled cushions, all designed to support your dignity without undermining your crease. But public furniture? A battlefield. Historians still argue whether furniture design followed fashion or vice versa. Did trousers stay flat because of bench modifications? Or did benches become shaped because of trouser paranoia? Like many things in Victorian society, the answer is muddled by pride and patents. Take, for example, the gentleman's folding perch, a ridiculous little contraption that looked like a walking cane, but unfolded into a triangle of canvas and wood. You could perch upon it, resting without sitting, like a flamingo trained in decorum. Popular among park-goers and amateur cricketers with weak knees, it never truly caught on in the city. Perhaps because it looked faintly like you were trying too hard not to collapse. And yet the fear of an unintended crease loomed so large that even the shape of cushions became subject to fashion. Hard cushions, shallow depths, bolsters behind the knees, all designed to encourage men to hover rather than slouch. The slouch, after all, was associated with moral decay and inferior tailoring. You start walking again, past a row of hedges trimmed to look like miniature horses. The afternoon sun hits the brick buildings at an angle that makes everything feel sepia-toned and slightly unreal. As you walk, you pass another gentleman, middle-aged, distracted, seated fully on a bench and eating a meat pie with visible abandon. You wince. His trousers are done for. You almost look away, but curiosity compels you. The trousers are a mid-gray, wool blend, once sharply creased, now misshapen. A faint curve above the knee, a sag near the hip, the telltale signs of someone who forgot that his trousers are not trousers. They are obligations. He catches your gaze, gives a nod. You nod back, tight-lipped. It's too late for him. But you carry on. A few minutes later, you pass a shop window displaying suits on mannequins. You pause. One mannequin is sitting on a chair. You exhale slowly. It's all wrong. The trousers have gathered just above the ankle, and the crease has bent backwards like a sigh. You wonder who approved this display. You move on, disturbed. Your next stop is the Gentlemen's Reading Society, a quiet club with too many leather chairs and too few readers. But you're not there to read. You're there for what the members refer to, without irony, as the standing lounge. It's a large room with tall windows, soft music, and rows of waist-high leaning rails. No chairs. Just soft, sloped perches padded with velvet, designed for resting without sitting. Men lean here, sipping tea, reading telegrams, and gently judging each other's tailoring. You take your place at an empty rail, grateful to be off your feet, but not in a way that risks horizontal compression. A steward appears with a small linen towel, which he offers to protect your sleeve from the wood polish. You accept it graciously. Nearby, a man whispers, "New flannel?" to his companion. His companion replies, "Yes, imported. They say it resists heat creases." The tone is reverent. You do not speak. But you smile faintly, because today your trousers still whisper when you walk. And when they stop whispering, when they fall silent, flat, and sullen, that's when you'll know you've lost. But not yet. The standing lounge hums with the kind of silence only wealthy discomfort can buy. Around you, other men, each swaddled in wool and dignity, sip their lukewarm tea from fine porcelain cups, held delicately by the rim, never the bowl. Holding a cup improperly, much like sitting too casually, is another invitation for rumors. And rumors, as you know, are harder to press out than a bad knee crease. You shift slightly at your velvet-padded rail, adjusting the angle of your elbow to allow for optimal teacup maneuvering. The goal is to create the illusion of total ease, while in fact engaging at least 7 muscle groups to preserve your trouser line. You take a sip. It's chamomile, soothing, subtle, and incapable of staining wool. Just the way you like it. Across from you, two older gentlemen converse in the quiet murmur of men discussing trousers like others might discuss political treaties. One says, "Mine held until the carriage." The other raises a brow and replies, "Ah, but did you use the block?" You know what they mean. The block is a small carved walnut device, just wide enough to span a gentleman's thighs, that he might place discreetly beneath himself while sitting, thus creating a raised channel to prevent direct contact between fabric and flesh. It's absurd. And it works, sometimes. Unless you forget it's there and shift your weight. You remember one ill-fated dinner party when Sir Edmund Bramble used a block but placed it too far back. He shifted mid-course. It shot out from under him like a buttered toboggan and struck the footman. They never speak of it directly, but it's become a shorthand legend, the incident of the walnut projectile. You set your cup down on the rail and glance at your trousers, still smooth. You exhale, shallowly. Deep breaths can cause hip flexion, and flexion is the enemy. Now, one of the lounge's stewards approaches with a small brass trolley. Upon it sits a device that looks like a hybrid between a violin press and a waffle iron. This is the gentleman's trouser refresher, a hand-cranked contraption designed for emergency recreases. He stops beside a tall fellow near the fireplace. The man lifts one leg, ever so slightly, and lays it across a narrow velvet block. The steward slides the press over the trouser leg, cranks the handle twice, and removes it with a flourish. Steam curls gently into the air. The crease sharpens. Historians still argue whether these lounge-based pressing services were originally invented for convenience or simply to show off. After all, pressing your trousers in public is a subtle flex, one part fashion, one part class warfare. It says, "Look at me. I own a valet, but I also have access to mid-afternoon linen refinement." The steward offers the trolley to you, but you shake your head politely. Not today. Your line holds. Behind you, a grandfather clock chimes 3. The time has come to move on. You step away from the rail, give your trousers one last brush down with the side of your hand, and walk slowly toward the cloakroom. As always, the key is to keep movement deliberate, with just enough hip engagement to suggest mobility, but not so much that it wrinkles. The cloakroom attendant greets you with a nod and retrieves your walking cloak, a sweeping wool garment not worn for warmth, but for something far more important: trouser protection. Yes, now we reach one of the more curious chapters in your day, the walking cloak trick. You slide the cloak over your shoulders, letting it fall just to mid-calf. Tailored to perfection, it flares slightly at the sides to avoid catching on your trousers. But the true genius lies in the hidden inner seams, lined with a stiff but soft-edged muslin panel that hangs down and rests gently against the sides of your legs. It doesn't touch your trousers. That would be sacrilege. But it shields them from wind, from dust, from sudden streetcar breezes that might press the fabric to your thighs and ruin the line. As you walk, the cloak sways gently. It's like having a mobile awning for your pants. It's not flashy, of course. Flashy is for French fashion houses. You're an Englishman, and subtlety is your armor. You step back into the street. It's a little busier now. Carriages rumble past, and you spot two street sweepers scooping away the aftermath of a particularly wayward vegetable cart. You give them a wide berth, not because you're afraid of dirt, but because splatter is an existential threat. Your cloak does its job, fluttering just enough to suggest motion, but not enough to touch your legs. You pass a bakery and inhale the warm scent of flour and cinnamon. Lovely. But no pastries today. Flakes are the enemy of wool. One careless bite, and it's a field of crumbs across your lap, followed by the slow and shaming ritual of brushing them away in public. revealing every wrinkle in the process. You continue walking. Ahead, you see a gentleman less fortunate. His cloak is shorter, cut more for flair than function, and he's made the bold choice of stepping onto a damp section of the walkway. A splash arcs upward. He freezes. You see it before he does. The moisture makes contact just below his knee. It's small, but the wool responds as it always does, with betrayal. The crease weakens, folds slightly. He glances down. You exchange brief, tragic eye contact. You tip your hat. He nods, resigned. Your own trousers remain untouched. You continue your stroll down the avenue, your cloak still swishing politely around your ankles like a loyal but unobtrusive sidekick. The breeze has picked up now, teasing the lapels of your coat and ruffling the feathers on Mrs. Featherstone's bonnet as she passes in the opposite direction. But your trousers? Unmoved, untouched, immaculate. The cloak works. You pause before the entrance to a small bookshop, the kind with windows so dusty they create their own climate. You're not here to browse penny novels or ponder theological tracts. You're here because you know something most passers-by don't. The shop contains a particularly useful object, a long, velvet-cushioned settee designed for standing. Yes, a leaner. Inside, the air smells of leather bindings and ink, with a subtle undertone of pipe smoke and paper mold. You step carefully between the aisles, cloak flowing gently behind you, and make your way to the back, where the settee waits. It's not meant for sitting. Heavens, no. It's pitched at a peculiar angle, exactly 27 degrees, just enough to support a man of medium height in a noble lean. The pressure is absorbed by your coattails, not your trousers. Perfect. You lean. You breathe. You adjust your gloves, which are butter soft and only slightly dramatic. And you admire the fact that someone, somewhere, thought to install such a niche fixture in the name of crease protection. Historians still argue whether these leaning lounges were a quiet protest against Victorian formality, or an extension of it. Some suggest they began as simple space-saving benches and evolved when high society gentlemen demanded furniture that supported them just enough to avoid deflation. Regardless of origin, they're an unsung miracle. As you rest, your eye catches a title on the nearest shelf. The Proper Management of Daily Dress for Gentlemen of Moderate Income. A thrilling read. You recall a passage about trouser steam maintenance using a teapot spout and a folded cravat. Dangerous, but daring. You smile. Of course, not everyone could afford the luxury of a valet or a pressing table, especially among the upwardly mobile middle class. So, they improvised. And improvisation is rarely kind to trousers. You once met a clerk who swore by an overnight crease retention trick involving 2 broom handles and a stack of Dickens novels. It worked, he claimed, until the books collapsed and gave his pants the outline of Bleak House in reverse. A literary tragedy. You reposition your foot slightly, shifting your weight. Still no bunching, still no sag. You're golden. Now comes one of the day's more delicate moments, removing the cloak. The streets are warmer than expected. You've reached the edge of the shopping district, where sunlight bakes the cobblestones into a kind of stylish griddle. Too warm for wool on wool. The cloak must come off. You select a sheltered corner near a hatter's storefront, turn your back to the foot traffic, and reach up to unfasten the hidden clasp. With a practiced motion, you slide the cloak from your shoulders and fold it, not in half, never in half, but in thirds, like a letter to a duchess. You drape it over your left arm, smooth, discreet, dignified. Your trousers are still pristine, but now you're exposed. This is the danger zone. With the cloak removed, your legs are at the mercy of the elements. Wind, dust, stray elbows, pigeon wing beats. You must be vigilant. Fortunately, your next stop offers a bit of protection. and a peek into the wonderfully absurd world of brass hip frames. Yes, that's where you're headed next. Your tailor's cousin's shop, a little-known boutique for mobility-assistive undergarment structures. You step inside, ducking slightly to avoid the dangling tape measures and ceiling-hung pantaloons. The place smells like beeswax and ambition. You're greeted by the shopkeeper, a gentleman of advanced years and exaggerated waistcoats, who nods as if he already knows what you've come for. He gestures towards the back room, where a display case showcases an array of obscure understructures, once intended to preserve the gentle curve of a well-ironed trouser. The brass hip frame, for example, is exactly what it sounds like. A small scaffolding of lightweight metal designed to sit around the hips and thighs, beneath the trousers, suspending the fabric just off the body. Imagine an umbrella frame flipped upside down and worn as a fashion defense mechanism. Ingenious, impractical, completely serious. You tried one once, years ago. It worked, in theory. But the squeaking. Every step sounded like a haunted bicycle. And one particularly gusty afternoon, the left frame inverted in the wind and nearly lifted your entire right leg into the air like a semaphore flag. Still, you appreciate the dedication. These were not accessories. They were philosophies. Every piece of gentleman's engineering reflected an entire worldview. The idea that with just the right angle, the right tension, the right amount of brass, a man could be both mobile and crease-free. Historians have yet to agree on who invented the first hip frame. Some point to a retired military engineer from Bath. Others claim it was the fever dream of a failed corset designer. Either way, it never caught on widely. Too complex, too rattly, and, in one rather public case, too flammable. You run your fingers lightly along the edge of one such device in the shop. It hums faintly, as if remembering a time when its brass limbs once embraced wool with purpose. The shopkeeper offers to let you try it again, but you decline. Today, you're going cloakless and cage-free, a small act of rebellion. Or trust. You thank him, step outside and glance down. Still smooth. You walk on. You stride onward, past shop windows and bustling lanes, your trousers holding steady like twin banners of self-respect. With the cloak neatly draped over your arm and the memory of the brass hip frame still clinking faintly in your mind, you feel more than dressed. You feel armored. The world is noisy, crowded, filled with soot and shouting vendors. But your crease remains a calm, vertical truth amid the chaos. You stop at a newsboy's stand, not for the headlines, but for the reflective pane of polished tin behind the papers. A discreet angle reveals your side profile. The line down your left leg is immaculate. The right, ever so slightly bowed near the ankle. You raise an eyebrow. The culprit? A stray gust from an alley draft, most likely. Or perhaps you crossed your legs too tightly when admiring the leaning settee earlier. It's not a crisis, but it's a situation. Now comes the emergency strategy. The street-side straightening maneuver. It's a subtle art. A dance, almost. You step slightly to the side, pretending to examine a pair of gloves in the haberdasher's window. With one foot behind the other, and your back conveniently to the glass, you straighten your leg, tilt your pelvis forward just so, and pull gently at the fabric near your thigh. Then, using the inside of your hand, you slide downward. Firm, even pressure, never rushing, reforming the crease from hip to ankle. It's a delicate moment. Too aggressive, and you'll stretch the fabric. Too soft, and the line won't hold. You strike the balance, always the balance, and it works. The crease reasserts itself. You give your reflection a nod so subtle only a tailor would notice. Historians still argue whether the Victorian gentleman's public pressing habits constituted social faux pas or quiet acts of defiance. On one hand, some considered it vain to preen on the street. On the other, maintaining one's appearance, especially when it involved trousers, was seen by many as an essential component of personal discipline, no different than straightening a cravat or brushing off one's cuffs. In any case, the crease remains intact, and you proceed toward your next destination. The Gentleman's Club, a sanctuary of leather, silence, and faintly judgmental taxidermy. It is here, tucked into a side street and shielded from the common din, that you may truly rest. Not sit, of course, but rest. You enter through the main doors, greeted by a footman with perfectly flat lapels and a gaze like lightly steamed granite. He recognizes you. Most of them do. Inside, the club is dim and carpeted, with soft footfalls echoing like polite sighs. You cross the main foyer and head straight for the cloak and umbrella room, where the real treasures reside. Not outerwear, but a selection of crease guards stored behind a sliding walnut panel. Your valet has reserved one. The crease guard is a marvel of design. A lightly curved, padded slab of beechwood, shaped to mirror the fall of a gentleman's thigh. It's covered in pressed velvet, cool to the touch, and designed to slip discreetly under your leg while reclining. Not that you plan to recline, but still, options matter. You collect yours with a nod and move toward your preferred spot in the smoking room. Not to smoke, naturally, but because of the unique angle of its armchairs. These chairs, custom-made decades ago, feature cutaway seats. A gentle dip in the middle that allows a man to sit without compromising the sharpness of his trousers. Imagine a hammock cradling your dignity. You don't sit yet. First, you place the crease guard in position. You lower yourself carefully, knees tight, heels together, hands bracing the arms of the chair as though descending into a moderately hot bath. Once seated, you keep your weight evenly distributed, thighs parallel and ankles crossed just beneath the hem. Your trousers don't fold. They rest. A nearby gentleman clears his throat softly, as though to signal approval. You nod. Someone opens a window. A slight breeze drifts in, rustling the heavy curtains. The smell of burning cherry wood and pipe tobacco curls through the air like a sleepy dog. You reach for a small saucer of sugared almonds, a safe snack, clean and dry, and pop one into your mouth. It's peaceful here, and more importantly, safe. No puddles, no benches with slats, no breezes strong enough to lift fabric. Just oak panels, whispered debates about prime ministers, and the quiet rustle of newspaper pages. Still, you don't linger too long. Trousers, like milk or monarchy, benefit from constant monitoring. You rise. Slowly, of course, pressing your hands into the arms of the chair with a small exhale. The crease guard slips out as easily as it entered. A quick brush down, and you're good as new. Better, even. Outside the club, you step back into the sunlight, refreshed. Your trousers? Divine. You step from the sanctuary of the club into the afternoon bustle, your movement smooth, deliberate, like someone who's just walked out of a drawing room, not a war zone. Which, in some ways, is what the outside world has become when your trousers are freshly creased and vulnerable to every ripple of life. The streets are busier now. Horse-drawn carriages rattle past, their wheels flicking up specks of mud from the road. A man in a bowler hat runs to catch a trolley, his coattails flapping like a distressed gull. You watch him go, only mildly sympathetic. He'll arrive on time, yes, but his trousers will arrive looking like they spent the morning in a napkin ring. You, on the other hand, proceed calmly, calculating each step. You dodge a vegetable vendor and take a side street not because it's quicker, but because it's less chaotic. This is not paranoia, it's planning. You glance down, still smooth, still proud. As you walk, your mind drifts back to one of the lesser-known heroes of the Victorian wardrobe, the trouser stretcher. Now, most people imagine these as the wooden racks used at night, which they are. But the true connoisseur recalls the portable version, a collapsible metal device designed to be slipped inside each leg of your trousers before hanging them, say, over a rail or a door. It applied a constant, gentle tension, like a firm but loving nanny for your pants. They were often kept in luggage. Some gentlemen wouldn't travel without them. In fact, one legendary statesman is said to have owned 7, one for each day of the week, labeled and monogrammed. It's unclear if this is true, or just one of those stories circulated among valets and tailors to pass the time. Historians still argue whether the portable trouser stretcher originated in Savile Row or was borrowed from military kit designed to keep uniform trousers parade-ready in distant outposts. Either way, their invention marked a turning point, the first time a man could defend his crease on the move. You remember using one once during a brief country trip, hanging your trousers in the guest barn while pretending it was a holiday cottage? The device worked beautifully until a curious goose mistook it for a roost and knocked the whole thing over. You found your trousers crumpled beneath a bucket of oats. It was a dark day. You cross the street now, timing your step between a particularly rhythmic clatter of horseshoes. The crowd thickens, and you spot the telltale signs of an approaching hazard, a group of small boys, laughing loudly and kicking something unidentifiable across the path. Children, as you know, are the natural predators of trouser creases. They operate on chaos and jam, and the moment you let your guard down, they will touch you. So, you employ the classic maneuver, the side glide. A swift but subtle redirection of your path, aided by your walking stick and a look that says, "I am too tired and too pressed to be involved in your game of cobblestone football." It works. You slip past them, trousers untouched. One boy throws a pine cone. It misses. You live to walk another day. And now, at last, you arrive at your tailor's shop once again, not for a pressing, but for something far more ambitious, a fitting. Today, you're commissioning a new pair of trousers, and not just any trousers. These will be made from an experimental wool blend, said to resist both wrinkling and humidity, woven in a small village in northern Italy, where the sheep eat only chestnuts and listen to sonatas. Or so the salesman claims. Inside, Mr. Langley greets you with his usual frown of admiration. He gestures toward the fitting room, where a bolt of deep charcoal fabric lies draped across a mannequin like a fainting duchess. You remove your current trousers behind the privacy screen and step into the mock-up pair. They're crisp, stiff, full of potential. As Mr. Langley begins to pin, you strike the required poses. 1 foot forward, 1 hip back, a slight bend in the knee, all while balancing on a rug that seems designed to catch pins more than customers. The process is meditative. Mr. Langley mutters about rise depth and ankle taper. You nod, even when you don't understand. He speaks the sacred tongue of seam allowance, and you are a humble congregant. As he folds a dart near your calf, you ask gently about the pleat debate. He pauses. "Pleats," he says, "are for men who plan to sit." It's a mic drop delivered in a whisper. You nod. The moment passes. Behind you, the shop's bell jingles, and another customer enters. He's younger, louder, and wearing trousers that could best be described as brave. They are cuffed incorrectly, the line bends near the shin, and, worst of all, there's visible bunching around the knees. You feel a deep, ancestral sigh rise within you. Mr. Langley glances at the newcomer, then returns to your hem with redoubled focus. The pins click. The chalk lines are drawn. A crease is born, not pressed, not burned in, but drawn with intention. When the fitting concludes, you return to your original trousers, still warm from your body, still loyal to their fold. You slip back into them with care, one leg at a time, and smooth the fabric as if greeting an old friend. The crease holds. Naturally. You thank Mr. Langley and step outside once more, the sun lower now, casting long, flattering shadows. You walk past a row of gas lamps just beginning to flicker to life, their glow catching the crisp edge of your trouser line with the kind of reverence reserved for stained glass or fine porcelain. Somewhere behind you, a carriage hits a rut, and a passenger curses. But your line? Flawless. You walk on into the golden warmth of early evening, that precious hour when gas lamps awaken, and the city begins to glow with the sleepy charm of a half-lit theater. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, roasted chestnuts, and the faint musk of too many over-scented cravats. You blend into it all like a silent, crisply folded shadow. Trousers immaculate, stride measured, consciousness hyper-aware of every possible threat to your crease. You pass a flower cart overflowing with roses, lavender, and chrysanthemums, and momentarily consider bending down to sniff a bloom. But then you remember, bending at the waist without support is a known crease killer. Besides, your trousers are already scent-marked by the cedarwood lining of your wardrobe, a far more refined perfume. Instead, you settle for a well-timed inhale as you pass. A gentleman never overreaches. Your destination now is a dinner engagement, formal, of course, and hosted by Lord Averill, a man known less for his politics and more for his unnaturally smooth trousers. Some claim he sleeps standing up in a narrow wardrobe lined with velvet. Others say he owns 3 pairs of trousers per day and changes between courses. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. Still, the man knows a thing or two about pleats. You arrive at the Averill residence, a grand home with the kind of staircase designed to be walked down slowly while everyone pretends not to look. The butler greets you with the obligatory nod and directs you to the cloakroom. You remove your coat and walking stick, but not your confidence. That stays on. Inside, the drawing room is filled with soft music, clinking glasses, and the warm rustle of evening conversation. You scan the room. The trousers here range from acceptable to ambitious. There are a few men seated, a bold choice, and you notice immediately which ones regret it. A crumple near the groin here, a sag at the rear there, the high-risk gamblers of fashion. You decline the armchair offered to you by the hostess and instead take up residence by the mantelpiece, elbow perched lightly on the edge. You strike the stance that says, "I could sit, but I choose not to." A footman offers a tray of canapes. You select the safest, a small water biscuit with cucumber. No crumbs, no oil, minimal risk. You chew thoughtfully while watching Lord Averill glide into the room. And yes, his trousers are perfect. They reflect the light just enough to draw attention without boasting. The crease is so precise, you're convinced it could slice a letter open. It's said that Averill uses a pressing method learned from a retired opera costumer in Venice, one involving marble rollers and lavender steam. Whatever the truth, you nod in quiet respect as he passes. Soon, dinner is called, and here it comes. The greatest threat yet to your trousers' well-being. The dining chair. It's upholstered, high-backed, velvet, luring you in with its softness like a siren on a cliff. You approach cautiously. A butler pulls the chair back. Now comes the maneuver you've practiced in mirror and shadow. The controlled descent. First, a fingertip to the edge of the table, just to gauge the spacing. Next, both hands to the arms of the chair. You hover. You glide down, not so much sitting as lowering. Your back stays straight, your knees tight. Your trousers bunch just slightly at the bend, but the fabric resists. It has been trained for this. As your weight settles into the seat, you make the final adjustment. A small backward tilt of the hips, drawing the crease taut. And there, you're seated, upright, respectable, uncreased. Historians still debate whether Victorian gentlemen truly dined in comfort, or whether dinner was, in fact, a highly controlled endurance test with roasted lamb and watercress salad as rewards. The truth is, posture was everything. Reclining was for the drawing room. The dining room demanded precision. A servant pours wine. You decline the red, spills are forever, and opt for the white, which stains with more discretion. You reach for your knife and fork, noting how your sleeve brushes lightly against your lap, dangerously close to the crease zone. You adjust. All is well. The meal proceeds with conversation about steamship schedules, parliamentary rumors, and the unusual shape of a visiting Belgian ambassador's mustache. You nod, smile, and offer the occasional comment, but your true attention is on your trousers. How they move, how they bend, how they survive. At one point, a guest beside you shifts in his seat with too much flair. His trouser leg rides up, revealing an exposed ankle and a crumpled hem. You offer him the briefest glance of sympathy. He knows. You know. We all know. You survive the main course, the pudding, and the cheese course without incident. The chairs are deep, yes, but your resolve is deeper. At the end of the meal, you rise slowly. This moment is crucial. Your body wants to stretch, but you cannot allow it. You must unfold like a letter opener, gracefully, cleanly. And you do. A quick brush down with the inside of your palm, one flick of the cuff, still perfect. The host calls for coffee in the drawing room. You follow, careful not to snag your hem on the rug fringe. A lady remarks on your posture. You thank her with a bow. The trousers bow, too, but do not fold. And in the corner, Averill smiles faintly. He knows coffee is served in delicate china, each cup a whisper of warmth with barely a handle to cling to. You hold yours properly, pinky modestly curled, wrist straight, and settle into a tall-backed chair positioned at just the right angle beside the hearth. Not a full sit, a controlled hover with most of your weight placed gently on your thighs, never your seat. The goal: drink without dissent. Others around you settle more freely, their chairs groaning softly beneath the accumulation of post-dinner luxury. Someone attempts to cross his legs, a well-known crease crime. You avert your eyes as his trousers twist mid-thigh, like a piece of licorice in distress. He doesn't notice yet, he will. You sip your coffee slowly, savoring the faint bitterness and the triumph of another day's line unbroken. As the evening winds down, guests begin to rise, shaking hands, gathering coats, and exchanging carefully measured compliments. You bow slightly to the hostess, thank her for a wonderfully firm dinner chair, and retrieve your cloak from the footman, who, it must be noted, holds it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for fine crystal or sleeping kittens. Outside, the night air has turned crisp, just shy of frosty. Your breath mists as you begin the slow walk home, your cloak once again serving as your woolen shield. Gas lamps flicker along the cobblestones, casting long, dramatic shadows that exaggerate every stride. You imagine your silhouette painted against the pavement, a man and his crease, undivided. This stretch of road is quieter, more residential. Fewer carts, more cats. A good place to breathe without risk of dust or soot. You pass by tall townhomes with their lace-curtained windows and brass knockers, each one likely containing at least one gentleman fumbling with a trouser press or praying his valet remembered to air out his linen drawers. As you reach a narrow mews, a memory surfaces. The Great Rain of '84. You were younger, bolder, less cautious in matters of fabric and fate. A storm had swept across the city with little warning, soaking streets and souls alike. You, of course, had your umbrella, but not your cloak, having lent it to a friend who later returned it smelling faintly of haddock. You tried to run. Never run in wool. The result was catastrophic. Not only did the rain soak through, but the friction from your hurried steps caused both creases to invert, folding inward like collapsing bellows. By the time you reached shelter, your trousers resembled wrinkled accordion sleeves. Your valet wept. You did too, though only on the inside. Historians still argue whether this rainstorm changed fashion habits permanently. Some say it prompted the invention of weather-resistant trouser wax, a short-lived solution involving beeswax, turpentine, and a smell that haunted drawing rooms for months. Others suggest it simply reminded gentlemen to carry cloaks year-round, regardless of forecast. Either way, you learned. You walk now with the reverence of one who's seen trouser chaos and lived to press again. Ahead, your flat beckons. A tidy row house nestled between a tailor's apprentice quarters and a widow who collects decorative hats. You approach the door, key ready, and glance down one last time. The creases? Still there. Still holding. A quiet victory. Inside, your sitting room greets you with silence and the smell of lavender sachets tucked discreetly into the corners. You remove your cloak with the delicacy of a man disarming a trap. Then you do what must be done. The final inspection. You stand before your wardrobe mirror, tilt slightly, and lift each leg in turn. The day has taken its toll. There's a faint softening near the knee on the right leg, likely from the dining chair maneuver, but nothing catastrophic. You brush the area gently, whispering encouragement. Now for the evening ritual, the pressing board and overnight hang. You walk to the wardrobe where your valet, off on holiday this week, has left the tools. A solid pine pressing board covered in flannel, your miniature iron warming gently near the stove, and a small vial labeled eucalyptus for gentlemen. Not for the trousers, for your nerves. You lay the trousers flat on the board, every motion deliberate. First, a light spritz of distilled water, then a cloth barrier, then the iron, pressing down, never dragging. The hiss of steam is comforting, like a cat sighing. Each leg is given its due. You reset the crease, coaxing it back into perfect verticality, as if explaining the concept of posture to an overly enthusiastic acrobat. When finished, you lift the trousers by the waistband and hang them on the custom curved wooden hanger. Below, a second bar supports the cuffs. Horizontal, elevated, unswayed by gravity. You step back and admire the work. Tomorrow's canvas awaits. Historians still debate whether the Victorian obsession with pressing bordered on neurosis. But the record shows that for every hour spent drafting laws or composing music, there was likely an equal hour spent aligning the grain of one's trousers with the grain of society. Discipline wasn't just external. It was worn. You dim the lamps. The mirror catches your reflection one last time. Crisp, content, and as you retire for the night, you glance once more at the wardrobe, its contents dark, orderly, and dignified. The crease, like your good name, intact. The morning light arrives shyly, filtering through the lace curtains in thin, golden ribbons. You lie in bed for a few moments, savoring the muffled sounds of the city stirring to life. Carriage wheels rolling over cobblestones, the distant whistle of a milkman. A newspaper hitting someone else's front step with a thud, just sharp enough to suggest disappointing headlines. But you don't rush. Today, like every day, begins with preparation. You rise slowly, stretch with control, arms only. The legs remain still, lest you tempt fate and loosen the muscles near the hip. Your eyes drift toward the wardrobe, where your trousers, now fully rested and creased with the reverence of cathedral pillars, await. They hang with dignity, precisely 2 inches from the back wall, untouched by neighboring garments. You shuffle to your wash basin in slippers and robe. Cleanliness comes first, of course. But so does observation. You study your reflection, not for vanity, but for readiness. The skin under your eyes holds only a hint of sleep. Your collarbone sits at a proud right angle, and the neck will accept a cravat without complaint. All systems are go. After the standard rituals of soap, shave, and splash, you approach the trouser altar. There they are! Midnight charcoal, single pleat, button fly. The same pair from yesterday, revived and even sharper for their rest. You brush a stray bit of lint from the left knee with the tenderness of a man smoothing a page in a treasured book. Dressing is a sequence. Trousers go on before suspenders are adjusted, after socks, but before boots. Always boots last. Never tug your trouser leg over them like a desperate actor backstage. No. The boots wait. You remove the trousers from their hanger with 2 hands, fold them once across your forearm, and carry them to the dressing chair. Not to sit on it, but to drape them for a final check. You inhale. Then you step in, one leg at a time, guiding the fabric up carefully, evenly. No sudden jerks, no panicked yanking. You don't wear trousers. You invite them to join your day. Once fastened, you perform the time-honored crease check. This involves 3 mirrors, a bit of bending, and a sideways squint so practiced you could identify a 0.5 millimeter wrinkle at 10 paces. All clear. Both creases sharp. Both legs aligned like 2 chapters of a well-edited memoir. Historians still argue whether the rise of the morning crease ritual was driven by true necessity or simply Victorian pride disguised as practical routine. Some suggest it evolved from military inspection practices. Others believe it was a natural extension of an increasingly regulated domestic life, where everything from breakfast tables to trouser legs demanded precision. You add your waistcoat, shirt, and coat with efficient grace. Gloves next. Then, with solemn care, you wrap your cloak over one arm, leaving your trousers free to bask in the open morning light. Bold? Perhaps. But fortune favors the crisply pressed. Breakfast is waiting. In the dining room, the table is set with your usual. Eggs poached to a moral degree, toast standing at attention in its silver rack, and a small pot of tea still steaming politely. You sit, not quite. You hover above the chair and execute the modified diagonal sit, developed after an unfortunate encounter with a wicker bench at a garden party in 1877. You lower yourself so that the pressure rests more on the backs of your thighs than the creases themselves, ensuring minimal compression. The plate is within reach. The trousers remain intact. You eat efficiently, with one hand occasionally brushing against your lap to feel for resistance or sag. Still smooth. A knock at the door signals your first appointment of the day. A walk with your colleague, Tennyson Smythe, a man of good humor and questionable pant discipline. He's punctual, unfortunately. So you gather your walking stick, don your hat, and step outside once more into a world that, while lovely, is constantly conspiring against your crease. You find him leaning against a post box, leg crossed casually over knee. A war crime. "Morning," he says, grinning. "Lovely day. Let's walk," you reply quickly, offering no commentary on the state of his trousers, though the pleat on his left leg appears to have migrated entirely off-axis. You stroll together through the park, past hedgerows trimmed to within an inch of their self-respect, and swans who seem to eye you knowingly. Tennyson Smythe chatters on about something. Stock performance? A dinner mishap? But your focus remains on the small rise ahead, a sloping hill with uncertain terrain. This is no ordinary hill. It is the incline of destiny. To walk a slope and emerge uncreased is to defeat gravity itself. It requires balance, foresight, and the proper deployment of your walking stick as both stabilizer and fashion declaration. You take the first step, heel down, stick forward, controlled lean, Let the weight glide through the hips, not the knees. Breathe. Tennyson Smythe charges upward, his boots kicking dust, his trouser cuffs flapping like forgotten sails. You do not watch. You ascend with dignity, your pace even, your gaze serene. At the top, a quick check. Hand to thigh, one sweep. Still smooth. You exhale slowly, like a kettle finally off the boil. From here, the city stretches below. Rooftops glinting, chimneys puffing soft smoke into the morning sky. And beneath it all, people moving, hustling, bending, crouching. Trousers everywhere, creased or otherwise, all telling stories of the lives they accompany. But yours tells the story of a man who walks with a ruler in his soul. You and Tennyson Smythe continue your stroll along the park's main promenade, its gravel path maintained to the exact texture preferred by both poodles and promenading gentlemen. You take care not to let your heels sink. Mud, even the suggestion of it, is a declared enemy of both dignity and dry wool. He speaks enthusiastically now about a novel involving dirigibles and werewolves, something serialized in a magazine with unfortunate paper quality. You nod politely, contributing an occasional "ah" or "indeed," while internally assessing your stride. Long enough to keep tension in the fabric, but not so long that it threatens to tug near the groin. The line must stay vertical. That is the law. At the far end of the park, you pause beneath a weeping elm. Its branches sway lightly in the breeze, rustling as if applauding your continued smoothness. Tennyson Smythe, clearly winded from his incline sprint, leans against the railing, again crossing his legs at the knee. You glance away. Some things are best not witnessed. As you rest, you recall the strange but compelling subculture that once flourished in Victorian London. The Order of the Unwrinkled Trousers. Not a joke, not entirely. This secretive club, founded by 3 haberdashers and a bishop, met quarterly to examine one another's trousers under lamplight and share strategies for fabric resilience. They developed their own coded handshakes. One involved brushing down the thigh while turning counterclockwise, and were known to pass judgment on fellow train passengers with a mere raised eyebrow. Historians still argue whether the order was a genuine fraternity of fashion or just a social outlet for men who preferred garments to conversation. Most agree, however, that they contributed several key innovations, including the knee press, a brief exercise done before sitting to keep wool taut across the lap. You've attempted it yourself on occasion. It involves shifting your weight onto your toes just before lowering into a seat, briefly stretching the fabric as though preparing it for a dignified landing. Some claim it helps. Others claim it simply confuses onlookers. You begin the walk back toward the city, passing a vendor selling roasted chestnuts. Tennyson Smythe buys a small paper cone and offers you one. You decline, citing pocket oil risk. He laughs. You don't. You part ways near the tram station. His trousers by now are a cautionary tale. Yours remain a quiet manifesto. You continue alone, weaving through back alleys with smoother stones and lower wind exposure. The quiet gives you space to reflect on one of the more curious figures in Crease history. Margaret Wexley, the trouser whisperer. Margaret was a theatrical costumer, known for her preternatural ability to shape garments to match the personality of the actor. In the 1870s, she began consulting privately for gentlemen of means, including a certain nobleman known only as the Duke of Stillness. Wexley believed that creases were not just lines, but statements of intention. A deep crease? Confidence? A soft crease? Mystery? A crooked one? You had secrets, and everyone knew. She pioneered the now-lost art of crease reading, wherein she would analyze a man's trousers like a palm reader might inspect lifelines. It was equal parts fashion and fortune-telling, and while no concrete records of her predictions survive, It's said she once refused to press the trousers of a man who later turned out to be a jewel thief. You walk with Wexley in mind, half imagining her voice whispering approval of your strides, your posture, the slight flare of your cuff just above the boot. You'd have liked her, probably, or feared her. Often the same thing. As you approach your next destination, a visit to the photography studio, you mentally prepare. Photography, in its current Victorian form, requires stillness bordering on statuary. The exposure time is long. The lighting is harsh. The opportunity for trouser creasing? Monumental. But you've planned for this. You arrive at the studio of Mr. Bartholomew Gage, a man with hands like a tuning fork and a mustache that predates at least one revolution. He greets you with a bow, his own trousers showing modest competence but lacking flair. "I've prepared the standing frame," he says, and you exhale in relief. The standing frame is your preferred pose. No seated cushion, no knee compression. Just you, your trousers, and the quiet dignity of a Victorian man pretending he isn't afraid of magnesium flash powder. You stand before the backdrop, a painted pastoral scene complete with a distant castle and one confused sheep. Mr. Gage adjusts the camera with reverence, then returns to inspect your stance. "May I adjust your shoulder?" You nod. He steps back. "Excellent. Hold that. Don't breathe." You comply. A single bead of sweat threatens your temple, but you channel all your focus into your legs. Stillness. Balance. Honor the crease. The camera clicks. It is done. Afterward, you glance at the negative through a special lens and see yourself, rigid, proud, and crisply outlined like the edge of a book just printed. The creases are visible, prominent, almost glowing. You thank Mr. Gage and leave, certain that the photograph, once developed, will become one of your most prized possessions. Not because of your expression, which is, of course, standard Victorian seriousness, but because of the trouser lines. You step out from the photography studio into the dusky hush of early evening, a soft hush settling over the city like a perfectly folded handkerchief. The gas lamps are flickering to life one by one, their golden halos diffusing through the mist that always seems to appear on cue. More theatrical than meteorological. You pause for a moment just outside the door, taking stock. The photo session, a notoriously risky affair, was a complete success. Your trousers remain pristine, not merely preserved, but elevated. You glance downward in a quiet moment of admiration, like a general surveying his troops after a victorious campaign. And now, with your evening open and your attire still immaculate, you decide to reward yourself. Not with champagne or sweets, too messy, but with a pilgrimage. To a place known only to the truly devoted, a private museum of gentlemen's tailoring. You turn north toward Bloomsbury, where an inconspicuous townhouse hides this hallowed establishment. The collection of noble fibers and habits is by appointment only, and naturally, your name has long been on the list. As you make your way there, your footsteps light. You can't help but feel the same excitement others might reserve for a trip to the opera or an illicit speakeasy. On the way, you recall one of the more eccentric exhibits, a pair of ceremonial trousers worn by a Baltic ambassador to Queen Victoria's Silver Jubilee. Legend has it they were so stiff with starch, they had to be propped against a wall, while the ambassador was fed by a footman using extra long spoons. The trousers, still in mint condition, stand upright in their glass case, defiant and dazzling. Historians still argue whether the starching was intentional or the result of a valet misreading the laundry instructions, which were, at the time, written in both Latin and a particularly aggressive dialect of Old Prussian. The ambassador himself gave no comment, though in one sketch from the day, his expression appears strained. You arrive at the museum's wrought iron gate, just as the last of the light fades. A discreet bell, a moment of silence, and the door creaks open to reveal an elderly gentleman in a dove-gray waistcoat and immaculately pressed trousers that glint faintly in the gaslight. "Mr. he begins. You nod. He smiles. "Of course, right this way." You step inside. The museum is more library than exhibit hall. Quiet, reverent, lined with wood paneling and velvet ropes. Glass cases gleam under dimmed sconces. Each one houses a relic of tailored glory. Frock coats once worn by baronets. Waistcoats dyed with crushed beetles. A pair of riding breeches that allegedly survived the charge of the Light Brigade entirely wrinkle-free. You drift from display to display, eyes wide, footsteps soundless on the thick carpet. One exhibit stops you in your tracks. A plaque reads, "The Trouser That Stopped a Duel." It tells the tale of two feuding noblemen in the 1860s, both convinced the other had insulted his tailor's honor. They met at dawn, pistols loaded, dignity on the line. But as they prepared to take their paces, one man's trousers betrayed him. Creased diagonally across the front in a way that suggested either panic or poor folding. The duel was called off. Not out of mercy, but because no man could duel with another whose trousers were in such a state. The crease had, quite literally, de-escalated violence. There's a faint chuckle in your throat. Not quite a laugh, far too loud for the room, but a ripple of joy all the same. You move to the final room, where the museum curator has arranged a special view of their newest acquisition. A pair of posthumously pressed trousers from the estate of Sir Archibald Van Tussle, the first man to patent an anti-wrinkle sitting cushion. The trousers are displayed flat, suspended within a glass panel like butterflies pinned in a display box. The creases are so sharp, they seem to cast shadows. There's something strangely moving about it. A garment that survived its owner. Fabric that remembers posture, purpose, and polish. It makes you wonder how many pairs of trousers outlive their wearers, kept folded in drawers, hung in closets, untouched yet untouched by time. You thank the curator in a hush and step back out into the night. The streets are quieter now, the kind of quiet that presses into your skin like fog. A newspaper cart rattles down a distant lane. Somewhere, a cat yowls its territorial hymn. You walk home slowly, the museum's reverence still clinging to your coat sleeves. You reach your front steps and take one last glance down. Your trousers? Still perfect. You let yourself in, remove your cloak with ceremony, and hang it in its designated space. The trousers are next. But not yet. First, you retrieve your small leather notebook, a personal archive of wardrobe victories and losses. You flip past past entries. Rain, March 3rd, crease held. Garden wedding, slight ripple near shin, investigate hem tension. And now you pen. Photo session and museum visit, no damage, full retention. A small check mark beside it. You smile. Then comes the disrobing. You unbutton slowly, slide the trousers off with the same delicacy one might use to remove parchment from a scroll case, and lay them on the pressing board. They're not quite done for the day. Not yet. One final brush down. A mist of cedar-infused water. And, for tonight only, the brass clip hanger. The fancy one reserved for triumphs. They hang there now, proud and uncreased, the quiet champions of a day well worn. And you? You retire, satisfied. The morning arrives with the kind of soft gray light that implies both modest ambition and total indifference. It's the sort of sky that makes promises like, you probably won't get rained on, but you know better than to trust it. After all, moisture is the eternal enemy of the crease. You rise with your usual care, swinging your legs over the side of the bed without letting the covers drag across your ankles. Your feet slide into slippers with military precision. The house is quiet. Outside, someone shouts something about kippers. You ignore them. The first order of the day, a domestic inspection. You pad gently over to the wardrobe. There they are, your trousers hanging like loyal soldiers awaiting orders. Still sharp, still serene. The cedar scent still lingers, faintly mingling with the undertones of yesterday's museum. A blend of starch, mahogany, and the unspoken hush of reverence. You remove the trousers, hold them up to the light. The crease still holds its breath. Not a shift, not a sag, just a line so straight it could serve as a ruler in a geometry classroom. You begin the dressing process again, as ritualistic and holy as ever. The room could catch fire, and you'd still insist on brushing the trouser cuffs before stepping into them. Each leg slides up with precision. Buttons fasten with a whisper. You bend, not quite, but enough to check the drape. It's flawless. You add the rest of your ensemble, waistcoat, shirt, braces, coat, and reach for your journal. The entry reads, "Cloudy, slightly damp air. Must avoid wooden benches." You underline it twice. Today's agenda begins with something a little different. A tailoring consultation. You've been invited, by letter of course, to a new establishment in Mayfair that claims to have perfected the science of immovable creasing. You raise an eyebrow, a bold claim. But you're intrigued. You walk to the omnibus stop with cautious optimism, taking the long way around the canal to avoid the narrow, muddy path behind the bakers. A single splash could end the day, and a day lost to splatter is a day of mourning. As you climb aboard the omnibus, you engage in the classic defensive maneuver known to gentlemen commuters across the city. The perch. This involves sitting, but not really, at the absolute edge of the bench, spine straight, knees together, letting only a sliver of your weight make contact. It's a difficult pose, one that causes ordinary men to sweat, fidget, or abandon all hope. But you have trained. You perch for 14 full minutes without creasing, a personal best. The tailoring shop on Bond Street is immaculate, all polished glass, marble flooring, and discreet tweed. The tailor greets you with a bow so subtle it barely counts as a nod. You respect that. He invites you into the fitting room, where bolts of fabric line the walls like ancient scrolls. He gestures toward a mannequin wearing a prototype pair of trousers, so perfectly creased they appear sculpted. "These," he whispers, "are treated with our proprietary steam-locking method. Gentle pressure, lavender vapor, woven with silk from a specific village in southern France, where the worms are only fed violets." You raise an eyebrow again. It's getting quite the workout today. He invites you to try on a sample pair. For science, for history. You oblige. Changing in the velvet-draped room is no small task. You fold your own trousers carefully, placing them on a silk-lined bench, and slide into the new creation. They're interesting, lighter, smoother, but the crease? Monumental. It casts a faint shadow in the mirror. You turn. It remains. "Walk," the tailor says simply. You do. It glides. There is no shift, no buckle at the knee. It holds. You pause. Consider. Historians still argue whether Victorian London truly saw the beginnings of performance tailoring, or whether these innovations were simply expensive experiments in stylish over-engineering. But one thing is certain. The obsession with crease perfection didn't just live, it evolved. You remove the sample pair and redress with your own faithful trousers. The old pair, now gently rested, feels familiar, secure. You look in the mirror and feel a small surge of loyalty. Technology may advance, but tradition never wrinkles. You thank the tailor and promise to consider commissioning a pair, though privately you know they could never replace the ritual, the ironing, the thrill of battle hard won. Wearing pre-creased trousers feels a bit like arriving at the summit by elevator. Technically correct, emotionally hollow. You step back onto the street, where the light has shifted again. Just enough sun to inspire confidence. Just enough wind to demand vigilance. You wander, now without a specific destination, letting your feet take you toward familiar paths. You pass a hat shop, a tobacconist, a bookseller. You linger briefly at the bookseller's window, where a copy of Etiquette for the Upright Gentleman is displayed between a gardening almanac and a treatise on pigeon races. You smile faintly. That book, while dry as old toast, once taught you that trousers should never touch the tops of boots, nor should they trail behind like petticoats. You remember underlining that section. Twice. You step into the shop and purchase it anyway. It feels right to own a second copy, for reference, for legacy. Back outside, the afternoon fades into a soft amber. You take the long route home, avoiding a cluster of street performers and a man selling oysters from a barrel. When you reach your stoop, you pause and look down once again, still holding, still straight. And as you unlock the door, you think, not for the first time, that perhaps your trousers aren't just a symbol of good grooming or status. Perhaps they're a philosophy, one that says life may be unpredictable, but some lines can be held. Some things remain sharp, no matter how soft the world becomes. Back inside your home, the first thing you do is close the door gently, letting the latch click into place like a punctuation mark on the day so far. Firm, precise, and satisfying. You stand in the entrance hall for a moment, letting the silence settle around you. Then you exhale, slow and long, as if releasing steam from your inner trouser press. You remove your gloves with practiced care, rolling each finger loose before slipping them off whole. They go on the tray beside your walking stick. No overlap. Everything in its place, just like the crease. You stroll through to the sitting room, admiring the small details that help keep you calm. The polished shoehorn by the hearth, the pressed linen napkins on their shelf, the faint scent of lavender wafting from the wainscoting. Yes, lavender again. It's everywhere these days. It's in the soaps, the sachets, the gentleman's pomade, and occasionally the sandwiches, though you try not to dwell on that. Then, with deliberate grace, you lower yourself into your reading chair, using what's become your signature method, the diagonal ease. One hip lowered first, then the other, thighs remaining almost parallel to the floor, spine curved just slightly, no knee bending beyond 30 degrees. The result? Minimal fabric compression, maximum crease retention. It's in this chair you keep your newest prize, the second copy of Etiquette for the Upright Gentleman, which you retrieved earlier. The pages are crisp, their scent that peculiar blend of ink and dust that only bookshops and libraries can preserve. You open the cover to find a handwritten note from a previous owner. To George, may you never slouch again. Strong advice. You nod approvingly. You turn to a chapter titled Posture and Pants, the Twin Pillars of Respect. Here, the author discusses the philosophical foundations of the Victorian trouser ideal. The line of the leg, he writes, reflects the line of the soul. If the trousers sag, what else have you let fall? If the pleat is lost, what more might unravel? Historians still debate whether Victorians truly believed such metaphors, or whether this was the literary fluff of an overpressed society. Some argue it was simply the era's penchant for making everything, even laundry, a moral exercise. Others claim there's something deeper here, a sincere, if slightly obsessive, attempt to carve order out of an unpredictable world. You think of the day's walk, the photo session, the trip to the tailor, all navigated without incident. Your trousers, smooth as a freshly ironed sonnet. There's truth in this madness. You flip a few more pages and find a subsection titled Emergency Responses to Unexpected Wrinkling. It reads like battlefield protocol. 1. Do not panic. 2. Assess location and severity. 3. Seek private shelter for light press or brush. 4. If no shelter is available, assume neutral standing posture and wait for fabric recovery. You chuckle softly. That last one you've used more times than you can count. Pausing beside a lamppost, pretending to admire the scenery while secretly letting gravity coax a wrinkle back into place. Like hiding a yawn behind a compliment. You close the book with a satisfying thump and set it down beside you. Then comes the next part of the routine. Less dramatic, perhaps, but no less essential. The evening airing. You rise again with care, walk back to the wardrobe, and retrieve your crease brush. A narrow, boar-bristled tool passed down from an uncle who once served as valet to a minor viscount. You run it along each leg with long, smooth strokes. Not too much pressure. This is not scrubbing, it's encouragement. Next, you step onto your pressing board. Not to iron, but to pose. You do a few gentle leg stretches, not for exercise, but to keep the fabric remembering its line. A half lunge, a lift of the knee, all with deliberate slowness. You once read about a group of retired bankers who gathered weekly in Hyde Park for synchronized trouser calisthenics. They called themselves the Creasemen. You've never joined, but the idea lingers. Afterward, you perform a final pocket check. Nothing hidden, nothing bulky. Pocket lumps are the silent saboteurs of sharp tailoring. You once lost a whole morning to the imprint of a rogue peppermint lozenge. Never again. Finally, you remove the trousers and lay them gently across the pressing board. The hanger awaits, but tonight you're giving them a few minutes of horizontal repose. Let the fibers breathe. As they rest, you light a small oil lamp, the flame casting gentle shadows on the walls, dancing like creases in a breeze. You sip a modest cup of herbal tea. No milk, no sugar, no steam directed anywhere near the wardrobe. And as the night deepens, you find yourself reflecting on an obscure anecdote from the museum. There was once a bishop who refused to give sermons unless his trousers had been freshly pressed within the hour. He believed his spiritual authority would falter otherwise. His valet once overslept, resulting in a homily so unfocused the congregation wandered out mid-sermon. A church divided by a crease. You smile at the thought. You admire the commitment, absurd as it may seem. But then again, here you are. Brush in hand, trousers resting, wardrobe humming quietly with cedar and pride. You check the clock. Time to hang them. You lift them with care, fasten them on the brass hanger, and slide them gently into their space. You run your hand down the outer seam one final time, as if tucking them in. They have served you well, and tomorrow they will serve again. The clock ticks with that soft, grandfatherly authority only an old timepiece can manage. You pause by the hearth for a moment, hands folded behind your back, gazing not at the fire. It's long gone to embers, but at the silhouette of your trousers hanging serenely inside the wardrobe. They look like sentinels, quiet, proud, ready. You turn away with a satisfied hum and head upstairs for the evening ritual. Not a bath, not tonight. Too much steam risk, just a wash, a stretch, and a few thoughtful minutes spent writing tomorrow's trouser itinerary. Yes, that's a thing. You sit at your desk and pull open a narrow drawer where you keep what might generously be called your crease calendar. Inside, arranged by month, are neatly labeled cards tracking wear cycles, environmental exposures, and seating events of historical consequence. For instance, a blue pair of summer wool trousers has a note attached. August toot. Incident with rogue spaniel. Emergency brush required. Tonight's card reads simply, Gray herringbone, park walk, photo session, tailor test, status, undefeated. You slip it into the triumph folder, a moment of quiet celebration. You light a second, smaller lamp at your bedside, then glance at the weather chart tacked beside it. A low-pressure system is creeping in from the west. High chance of wind, mild drizzle, intermittent gossip. A crease-conscious day, to be sure, which means tomorrow's trousers must be heavier. You make a note to pull the storm-weight wool pair, dark olive, double-stitched, with reinforced knee seams. Known for their defiant creases, even when faced with wet cobbles, soggy upholstery, or the back bench of a particularly reckless cab. Historians still argue whether these heavier fabrics were originally developed for military use or simply born from necessity in cities where puddles outnumbered pavements. Some tailors claimed their design was inspired by ship sails, woven tight enough to resist both wind and impertinence. Others believe it was just an excuse to charge more per yard. You close your notebook and slide under the covers, lying back against the pillows as you reflect on what a gentleman owes his trousers. Respect, for one. Protection, certainly. But also understanding. A true gentleman knows the limits of fabric. The difference between a stretch and a strain, between a rest fold and a full-blown crease collapse. You think back to the worst wrinkle of your life. It was a summer garden party. The kind hosted by eccentrics who believe cucumber sandwiches require a 3-hour ceremony and a harpist. You were seated, tragically, on a wicker chair that had both a warped frame and a thirst for destruction. You rose from that chair to discover a tripartite crease misalignment, one that began near the thigh and zigzagged its way down like a drunken lightning bolt. Gasps were heard. A parson fainted. You were rushed to the drawing room, where 3 footmen and a lady's parasol were required to shield the offending trouser leg from view while you changed. The incident became known in your personal records as the Wicker event. You still avoid wicker. And then, of course, there was the time you attended a cousin's amateur dramatics performance in a hastily converted barn. You sat on a hay bale. A hay bale. The results were predictable. Wool flattened, hay embedded, dignity abandoned. You learned then that family loyalty has limits, and seating is always worth vetting in advance. But those were younger years, before your full mastery of seating reconnaissance. Now, you can enter a room and survey it for crease threats in seconds. Velvet chaise? Acceptable with edge support. Overstuffed armchair? High risk? Bare wooden bench? Only in emergencies, and only if one performs the reverse hover sit. You glance at your bedside clock again. Late, but the calm kind of late. The hour where thoughts float instead of clatter. Outside, rain begins to fall, just lightly, tapping against the windows like a polite reminder that the world is not always indoor friendly. You rise, pad softly across the floor, and peek once more at your trousers in the wardrobe. Still there. Still perfect. But the rain changes things. You retrieve a small cloth bundle from the upper shelf. It's your wet weather crease kit. Inside, tucked between layers of flannel, is a length of beeswax thread, a gentle cloth buffer, and 2 small sachets of dried lemon peel. You tuck the sachets near the cuffs. An old valet's trick to fight mildew and unpleasant surprises. A little ritual, yes, but one with surprising results. You close the wardrobe slowly, letting the wood settle back with a satisfying click, and return to bed. You lie back, hands folded over your chest, and let your mind wander to your first proper trousers, the ones with the sharp seam down the front and a pocket so shallow you couldn't store a single coin. To the time you tried ironing your own pair and fused the fabric into a stiff curl, like a cinnamon stick. To the speech you gave at your brother's wedding, where your delivery was modest, but your pleats received applause. You think about the old stories, too, like the barber who only trimmed hair if he liked your trousers, or the rumor that Queen Victoria once had a valet dismissed because he failed to press a courtier's breeches before tea. There's a long history here, and you're part of it. Just one man, one crease, one rainy night before another very fine day. You awaken not with a jolt, but with the luxurious, unhurried unfolding of a man who has planned his morning down to the number of steps between bed and wardrobe. The rain has passed. The sky outside glows a patient kind of white, the kind that means the air is still heavy with yesterday's memories. But your bedroom is dry, cedar-scented, and humming with purpose. You sit up slowly, swing your feet down one at a time, crack the window an inch to test the air, moist but not damp. Safe enough if properly navigated. You approach the wardrobe like a priest approaches the altar. Today is for storm weight olive wool. These trousers are no nonsense, thick enough to resist wind shear, woven tight enough to repel the rogue drizzle. You remove them from their hanger with 2 hands. These are not summer linens. These are trousers with gravity. And with gravity comes consequence. They drape beautifully as you lay them flat across your pressing board for a final pre-wear inspection. Creases? Deep and righteous. Hemline? Even. Pocket flare? Minimal. You give them a gentle once-over with the boar bristle brush, flicking away any lint with a wrist motion so refined it might qualify as a curtsy. You slide into them with care. Braces secured, waistband aligned with the slight rise of your second vertebra. You glance in the mirror and see it. A line, sharp as a lance, from waistband to ankle. Uninterrupted. Unbending. And thus the day begins. You step outside into the muted clatter of London waking up. Horses pass. Steam rises from sewer grates like bored ghosts. You walk with that cautious confidence particular to men wearing crease-forward wool in uncertain weather. Your destination today is not a park nor a museum. It is far more fraught. You are going to a cafe. But not just any cafe. A new establishment on the Strand, rumored to have both upholstered chairs and floor-length tablecloths. A challenge, a potential crease nightmare, but also excellent scones and a clientele known for subtle judgment and fierce trouser gossip. You arrive, remove your coat with reverence, and are led to a window table. The host, a young man with clean boots and slightly crooked cuffs, gestures to your seat. You hesitate. The chair is plush. You perform a quick assessment. Cushion density. High. Back angle. Overly reclined. Fabric. Velveteen. Likely to cling. You engage the forward tilt sit. It's an advanced technique. You slide just to the edge of the cushion and shift your center of gravity forward, keeping tension in the knees and a straight back. You look casual. You feel like a suspended bridge. Your tea arrives. The scones follow. You don't dare butter them yourself. You enlist the server's help, pretending sudden weakness in the wrist, citing a recent fencing injury. He seems confused but obliges. You preserve your crease. Nearby, 2 elderly women watch you with expressions that suggest both curiosity and respect. One nods as if to say, "He knows." Halfway through the meal, you spot a small group entering the cafe. 3 men, all dressed well, but only one of them, the one in charcoal pinstripe, carries himself like a fellow crease devotee. You exchange a subtle glance. It's not quite a greeting, more of a nod across enemy lines. He sits. You observe his posture, the angle of his shin. His technique is less refined than yours. He's allowing slight fabric bunch at the back of the knee. But it's clear he respects the code. You finish your tea, dab your mouth, rise. You glance down. Your trousers? Still flawless. You exit the cafe with grace, feeling the eyes of the room following the soft rhythm of your walk. You give them something to remember. A slow pivot at the doorway, the kind that shows off the uninterrupted fall of your trouser leg from hip to shoe. Someone claps. Quietly. You pretend not to hear. Back outside, the clouds are shifting. A break in the overcast reveals a patch of blue as crisp as your inseam. You walk on, thinking of the cafe's furnishings, its challenges, and your triumph. You make a note to never order soup there, too splashable. But the chairs, while risky, are navigable with proper training. You turn onto a quieter street now, the kind with iron railings and houses that look like they've been exhaling for a century. Here, the city feels more like a library. The noise drops to a murmur. The cobblestones become friendlier. You stroll without urgency. Then you notice it, a small brass sign hanging above a door, faded but still proud. Madame Kepler, mender of gentlemen. You've heard of her. A tailor's tailor, an old-school master of repair and reinforcement. Her specialty? Crease resurrections. You step inside. The shop is dim but inviting. A clock ticks in the corner. Spools of thread, velvet pin cushions, and piles of folded garments sit with the serenity of a tea ceremony. A woman, small but entirely composed, looks up from her stool. Trouser emergency? She asks dryly, inspecting you from ankle to waist without rising. Not yet, you say, but one must always plan. She nods, and with a faint smile, gestures to a framed newspaper clipping on the wall. It reads, "The seamstress who saved Parliament's pleats. Apparently, she once re-creased an entire bench of ministers during a tea break. With nothing but steam, instinct, and a single wooden spoon." Historians still debate whether the account is literal or allegorical. Some claim the ministers were simply daft. Others argue that she truly could see the line of a man's ambition in the way his trousers fell. You purchase a small tin of her beeswax thread and a narrow cloth buffer said to prevent pleat diffusion in humid parlors. She includes a button, just in case, and nods solemnly as you leave. Back on the street, you feel fortified, not just in trouser but in spirit. Today has been a good day. And your crease? Still the kind of line one could follow straight into legend. The walk home is longer by choice. The streets glisten faintly from the morning rain, and your boots tap a rhythm so steady it might pass for polite applause. The trousers, storm-weight olive wool, continue to behave with admirable discipline. You move like a man rehearsed for this role his whole life, which, frankly, you have. You pause before a wide shop window displaying umbrellas. Not the flimsy sort that flip at the first breeze, but true gentlemen's umbrellas. Oak-handled, brass-tipped, likely capable of stopping a runaway cab. One bears a sign, water-resistant and wrinkle-conscious. You raise an eyebrow. A marketing stretch, perhaps, but you admire the optimism. The umbrella merchant steps outside. He's wearing trousers that have clearly been sat in, recently and unrepentantly. He offers you a flyer. You accept it, but not before glancing discreetly at the man's inseam. There is dimpling. You nod a polite goodbye and keep walking. A bit more upright now. It's not smugness, you tell yourself, it's posture preservation. As you round the corner, your mind drifts, as it often does, to the curious rituals surrounding trousers in polite society. There was, for instance, the Victorian tradition of the kneel test. Before a gentleman was allowed into certain private libraries, he was expected to kneel briefly, on a small velvet cushion, of course, to demonstrate the resilience of his creases. Those who emerged with sharp lines were granted entry. Those whose trousers wrinkled were politely redirected toward the drawing room. Historians still argue whether this practice was sincerely enforced or merely one of those upper-class oddities designed to amuse the idle and confound the ambitious. A few sources suggest it was also a subtle way of discouraging spontaneous political arguments, which were said to flare up more easily among men in relaxed fit trousers. You reach your door, unlock it with the usual theatrical pause, and step inside. The air is warm, slightly scented with pressed cotton and linseed oil. Your sanctuary. You remove your overcoat. Hang it, naturally. Then you turn to the mirror in the hall and do the customary inspection. Waistband, hip line, pleats. You run your hands down each thigh as if smoothing the fur of a prize cat. Still perfect, which means it's time for an indulgence. You make your way to the study and open the lower drawer of the old writing desk. Inside is a leather-bound folio of great personal importance, the Trousers Journal. Not to be confused with the crease calendar or the wear log. No, this is the literary volume, filled not with data, but with reflections. You leaf through the pages. Here's an entry on the ethics of sitting, another titled Trouser Behavior During Grief, and one particularly poignant essay, Rain at the Opera, a tragedy in 3 folds. You sit down to write today's note. Walked to the cafe. Crease survived soft cushion. No collateral wrinkling. Visited Kepler. Acquired beeswax thread. Felt prepared. The trousers led the way. I merely followed. You underline that last sentence. After closing the journal, you begin your afternoon maintenance. Today, that includes rotating the seasonal trousers. It's late enough in the year to move the lighter blends to the back and let the flannels and worsteds come forward into the light. You do this slowly, reverently, as though handling a collection of rare books. Each pair gets a light brush down, a cuff check, and, if needed, a pocket shake. You find a forgotten glove tip, a pressed violet, and an old train stub to brighten. You place each of them in your small wooden box labeled Trouser Adjacent Ephemera. Somewhere along the line, trousers stopped being just clothes. They became a map of your habits, your caution, your taste, your regrets. Every crease is a line drawn against the chaos of the world. Every pair that makes it through a damp Tuesday without rippling is a small, silent victory. You smile, folding the lighter pairs and tucking them away. Then you change. Yes, a second pair. It is late afternoon now, and the occasion calls for the dusk trousers, a charcoal pair with a faint herringbone weave, sharp enough to hear if you listen closely. These are not daywalkers. These are evening hosts, pairs that whisper rather than speak. You change with care, standing as still as a statue while the fabric settles around you. Then comes a gentle buff of the crease, a heel check in the mirror, and a slow turn to admire the cut. You glance at the clock. Just enough time for a walk around the block before supper. Outside, the air has cooled. You walk with practiced elegance, hands behind your back, the weight of the day drifting off your shoulders with each step. You think of a little-known custom among the upper-class barbershops of 1880s Edinburgh. Clients would sit not in chairs, but atop small, polished stools designed to minimize wrinkle potential. It was said a gentleman could receive a haircut, beard trim, and ear waxing without his trousers accruing more than half a ripple. There were even rumors of a barber who trimmed while the client stood, shifting foot to foot like a well-dressed flamingo. Scholars dispute whether this was standard practice or simply a marketing gimmick from an ambitious young stylist named Angus. Some say the stool was cursed and creased the trousers of those with impure thoughts. That part is, obviously, apocryphal. Still, as you walk along the garden railings and the street lamps blink to life, you find yourself smiling. The world changes. Trains speed up. Telegrams shorten attention spans. And someone somewhere has probably invented a synthetic fiber that laughs in the face of ironing. But your trousers? They still obey the rules. They still hold the line. Back home, twilight has curled itself around the windows like a soft shawl. The hallway glows with the mellow flicker of gaslight, and the polished wood beneath your shoes offers a faint reflection, just enough to confirm the crisp descent of your herringbone crease. You make your way to the dining room. Nothing elaborate tonight, just a light supper, a soft roll, a few slices of ham, a small bowl of pickled walnuts, and a tepid glass of elderflower cordial. Everything served on the sideboard, buffet style, to avoid extended sitting. The dining chair has a high back, minimal padding, and most crucially, a narrow seat base. Ideal for the perch and dangle method. You balance near the edge, keeping one leg subtly extended, never letting the fabric bunch. As you eat, your thoughts wander. First to the contents of the pickled walnuts, and then to a story you once heard from an older gentleman at your tailor's club. He claimed that the Prince of Wales once arrived at a garden luncheon with a full-length towel pressed between his trousers and the carriage seat. Folded neatly, satin-trimmed. Removed just before stepping out. The club, naturally, was divided over the story's authenticity. Historians still argue whether such techniques were actually used by the upper class, or whether they were mere exaggerations whispered by valet circles to inflate their mystique. A few personal journals mention similar fabric buffers, but it's never clear if they were daily protocol or just damage control after a poorly timed drizzle. You finish your cordial and rise, returning your dishes to the tray with the stealth of a man who knows that one false step, one overly wide stance or twist of the hip, can cost you the sharp line you've earned all day. Then, it's time for what you like to call the evening sachet, a gentle stroll through the ground floor rooms. Not for exercise, but for recalibration. You walk slowly from the dining room through the hallway, past the conservatory, and into the drawing room. Each step deliberate, each turn choreographed. You pause at corners, pivot on the heel, and move on. This, you tell yourself, is not vanity. This is crease maintenance in motion. You reach the drawing room, settle onto the edge of the armrest, not the seat, and light a small candle. The room glows gold, and the shadows soften. Outside, a light fog has begun to roll down the street, carrying the hush of late Victorian evening with it. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then changes its mind. You retrieve the latest edition of Gentleman's Gazette, your go-to source for trousers and trousers-adjacent commentary. This month's cover story, The Ethics of the Iron, When Pressing Becomes Obsession. Inside, an anonymous columnist describes a fellow who carries a travel iron with him in a velvet pouch, powered by a miniature hand crank. He uses it in hotel closets, railway compartments, even once mid-lecture, crouched discreetly behind a fern. The article poses the question: at what point does care become compulsion? You mark the page with a pressed lavender stem and chuckle. You're not like that, you assure yourself. You're reasonable, balanced. You simply understand that some fabrics require more communication than others. Besides, trousers have stories, like the brown moleskin pair you wore the day your neighbor's parrot escaped and landed, briefly, on your thigh, leaving both a claw mark and a trail of pumpkin seeds. Or the blue pinstripe ensemble that caught the light just right during that impromptu lawn duel between two dueling florists. You didn't intervene, of course, but your trousers did become part of the photograph in the Illustrated London News. You fold the magazine and set it aside. Then comes one of the evening's most delicate tasks, the slow drape. You return to your bedroom, remove the herringbone trousers carefully, always standing, and fold them across the pressing board with a precision honed by years of repetition. First the cuffs, then the waistband, then the full length of the leg aligned with the edge of the board, like an oath. You brush the inseam lightly. You fluff the lining with 2 fingers. You run a finger down the crease one final time, not to adjust, but simply to say, "Good work today." You hang them on their reserved brass hanger, then open the window just a crack for airflow. Wool, like people, appreciates a gentle breeze. Next, you slip into your robe, made of thick cotton, generously hemmed, and dyed a shade that reads as slate, but insists on calling itself charcoal dusk. It has a crease of its own, though you don't expect it to behave quite as nobly as your trousers. You sit in your reading chair and reflect on the day. From the storm-weight olive in the morning to the dusk-time herringbone in the evening, it has been a journey of precise movements, soft judgments, and the unspoken camaraderie between fabric and wearer. And soon, the day will be archived. You reach for your journal once more and jot a few closing thoughts. Tonight, trousers hung with honor, weather shifting, thoughts creased cleanly. Tomorrow, corduroy, if skies permit. You tuck the journal away, blow out the candle, and rise. One last walk to the wardrobe. One last glance at your lined-up army of legwear. Each pair ready. Each crease a promise. You turn out the lights, and as you pull back the covers and slide into bed, you feel not just tired, but accomplished. You have walked, sat, stood, turned, and dined. And through it all, your trousers remained faithful. The next morning begins with the soft, steady pat of raindrops on the window pane. More rhythm than menace. You open one eye, then the other, and remain perfectly still for several seconds. Not because you're tired, but because you're mentally assessing your trousers' rotation and the meteorological implications of light but persistent drizzle. You sit up slowly, stretch once, and reach for the weather logbook on the nightstand. Today's barometric reading: modest descent, humidity, elevated, wind, negligible, mood, contemplative. A corduroy day then, but only if paired with the proper overlayer. You rise and move to the wardrobe. Today's trousers are a dark caramel corduroy, thick wale, with reinforced seams and deep pockets. Corduroy, much maligned, much misunderstood, offers a certain gentle authority. It doesn't crease in the same way as wool or linen. Instead, it folds with a sense of intention, like origami made by someone who enjoys long silences. You remove the trousers from their hanger and lay them on the board for your standard vertical press check. Using 2 fingers, you test the fall of each leg. Still aligned? Still trustworthy? You give them a gentle shake. Corduroy enjoys a bit of flair. As you dress, your thoughts drift to the curious history of corduroy in Victorian circles. Originally a fabric of laborers and country gentlemen, corduroy found a foothold in urban fashion around 1887, when a forward-thinking haberdasher on Bond Street paired it with a velvet-collared coat and declared it town-worthy. Historians still argue whether this move was fashion genius or just a practical response to an overstock shipment from Manchester. Some say it was Queen Victoria's gardener who first wore corduroy at court and caused a mild scandal. Others believe it was a poet with a fondness for walking into hedges. Regardless, corduroy never quite fit in with the silk and satin crowd. But it earned respect. Not for shine, but for staying power. You fasten the waistband with the ceremonial double pat and check your reflection. The line? It's there. Not crisp, but firm. A confident suggestion rather than a declaration. You nod in approval. Today's plan includes a trip to the print shop, a stop at your tailor's window, and a casual visit to a friend's bookbinding studio. You dress accordingly: rubber-soled shoes, a soft cotton shirt, and a light overcoat designed for both coverage and dignity. You step out, umbrella in hand, and are greeted by the faint aroma of wet stone and chimney smoke. A truly Victorian olfactory palette. The walk to the printers is uneventful until you reach the cobbled alley where you're forced to sidestep a pair of students arguing over a particularly aggressive pamphlet. One nearly elbows you in the thigh. You pivot gracefully onto a side stoop and avoid contact. The corduroy bends and flexes like a loyal dog, absorbing the movement and springing back with only a soft puff of displaced air. You pat it down. Still immaculate. At the printers, you linger beside the press, watching as today's batch of calling cards gets its final emboss. You approve the typeface, but suggest a deeper ink tone, something with gravitas. The pressman, noting your trousers, nods thoughtfully and mutters, "Yes, of course, something that matches the weight of the leg." You tip your hat and carry on. At the tailor's, the window displays a new suit made of tartan so bold it might be classified as an act of protest. You shake your head. There are places for statements, and your legs are not that place. Still, you enter to say hello. Inside, the tailor, Mr. Penrith, gives you the once-over and makes a soft clicking sound of approval. Corduroy, brave. You smile. Or desperate. He laughs and offers tea. You decline. It's sitting tea, and the chairs here are too new to trust. Instead, you browse a few fabric samples. One in particular catches your eye. A pale dove gray worsted, soft to the touch but holding its line even as you bend the swatch. Spring collection, Mr. Penrith says. Named it the apostrophe. You raise an eyebrow. It's barely there but makes its point, he explains. You nod slowly. Tailors, like poets, are entitled to such metaphors. You purchase a half-meter for study and step back out into the soft gray afternoon. From here, it's on to the bookbinder's, who lives in a narrow house that smells of parchment, glue, and vague resentment. You love it. She greets you with ink-stained fingers and waves you into her studio, where pages lie like resting birds across every surface. She eyes your trousers and snorts. You're asking for trouble wearing that in here. I'm always asking for trouble, you reply, but politely. She laughs and tosses you a cloth square. For sitting, if you must. You don't sit. Instead, you browse the covers, run your hands along the spines, and absorb the quiet dignity of well-worn words. As you leave, she calls after you. Still think tweed's better. You raise your umbrella in salute, friendly rivalry. Back home, you change, carefully, into a softer pair of evening trousers. Cotton blend, navy, minimal pleat. You hang the corduroys on a flat hanger, letting the weight of the day ease out of them naturally. Then you note the day's events in the journal. Corduroy day, damp air but no sag. Printer approved, tailor amused. Bookbinder combative, good tension overall. You underline no sag, an important win. Outside, the rain has stopped. The house is still, and your trousers? Still holding. By evening, the house has settled into its softer rhythm. The tick of the long case clock, the occasional groan of the pipes, and the low hiss of the kettle beginning to fuss in the kitchen. You make your way through the dimmed hallway, brushing a hand along the wall as if confirming its existence. Everything tonight moves a little slower. The kind of slow that calls for drapery-friendly trousers and a mug of chamomile. You re-enter the bedroom and reach for tonight's ensemble. A pair of midnight blue lounging trousers, wide-legged and lightly pleated, worn only in the house after sundown. These are not flashy, they do not crave compliments, but they understand their role. They are the trousers that remind you it is safe to sit. You slide into them as if into a warm bath. The fabric sighs against your skin, the waistband settling just beneath your ribs in a position only the truly relaxed can tolerate. You pad barefoot to the sitting room, tea in hand, and claim the chaise longue. A piece of furniture as serious about its posture as you are about yours. You sit, fully, all the way back, and not for a moment do you worry about creasing, because tonight's trousers have no interest in angles. This is a rarity, but a necessary one, because trousers, like people, can only hold a line for so long before they need to let go. You breathe out. The room is quiet. The steam from the mug curls toward the ceiling like a lazy thought. You take a sip, and recall something your old tailor once said. There's no shame in soft pants, lad. Only in giving up the crease entirely. Historians still debate whether that phrase was ever actually recorded, or whether it was simply whispered from generation to generation of British haberdashers like a sacred proverb. Some argue the concept of soft trousers didn't truly take hold until the invention of indoor plumbing made loungewear a viable all-day option. You pick up your reading, an older book on the etiquette of housecoats. A niche interest, perhaps, but one that knows how to treat its trousers. There's a passage that catches your eye. The gentleman should never feel as though his trousers betray his intent. Whether at supper or in silence, His legwear must respect the dignity of his repose. You nod. Quite. As you read, your legs stretch out. One foot finds the edge of the ottoman. You shift once, gently, letting the fabric ripple without resentment. This is the sacred middle ground between elegance and surrender. The space where creases no longer matter and fabric simply flows. Somewhere in the middle of a chapter on robe-to-pajama transitions, your mind wanders to the curious case of Sir Roger Lindell, a little-known member of Parliament who was once publicly shamed for wearing sharply pressed trousers to bed during a countryside retreat. According to rumor, he claimed it was for dream alignment, that one's dreams flowed straighter when one's seams did the same. His wife disagreed, and he spent the remainder of the retreat sleeping in a small wooden shed with nothing but a tea towel around his waist and a very cross ferret for company. Historians remain divided. Was Lindell mad, or merely ahead of his time? You fold the book closed and let it rest on your chest. The mug now sits empty, the tea having done its work. The night air feels thick and forgiving. Your arms fall to your sides. Your toes twitch once. This, you realize, is the final form of trouser wear. Not display, not performance, but recovery. This is where the fabric holds you rather than the other way around. Where the waistband forgets its job, and the creases, if any, float away like the last wisps of fog across a moonlit field. You rise slowly, stretch once, and make your way to the mirror. These lounging trousers aren't sharp. They won't win admiring glances at the tailors. But they hold you well. They move with you. And most importantly, they ask nothing in return. You change into your nightshirt. Hang the lounging trousers with equal care beside your dressing gown. Even the soft ones deserve respect. At the wardrobe, your hand hovers briefly over the hangers, considering tomorrow. Forecast looks dry, a hint of wind. You make a mental note. Gray brushed flannel, with the reinforced knee dart. You smile to yourself. The battle never ends. But tonight, it pauses. You pull down the bed sheets, sit carefully, still in the habit even though there's no crease left to guard, and ease beneath the covers. The gaslight flickers once and is gone. And as your eyes drift closed, your last thought is not of war or politics or ambition. It's of a crisp wool trouser leg, falling perfectly from hip to heel, moving like a sentence that doesn't need correcting. Morning again. This time the light enters with confidence, a buttery wash across the floorboards that suggests the weather has, for once, decided to cooperate. You lie in bed for a beat or two longer, listening to the creaks of the house and the occasional distant clop of a milkman's cart. You don't rush. A sunny morning is a gift, and gifts should be unwrapped slowly. Eventually, you swing your legs over the edge of the bed and place your feet down with the careful dignity of someone preparing to stand before a tribunal. Not that you're guilty, but your trousers might be, if not properly chosen. You walk to the wardrobe, open it with both hands, and pause. Today's decision is a pleasure. You select the gray, brushed flannel trousers, favored for precisely this kind of crisp morning. The fabric is thick enough to hold its line, soft enough to forgive small sins. Reinforced knee darts and a double-folded hem mean you're set for a full day. Whether it holds formal tea or spontaneous puddles, they come off the hanger like old friends, and you place them on the pressing board for a final once-over. A touch of the iron, just a hint of steam, and the creases spring back to life with a kind of theatrical poise, as if they were waiting backstage just for your cue. As you dress, the fabric slides on with no resistance. Waistband settles in its rightful place. The pleats hold a moment of breath. The cuffs kiss the tops of your socks with soft intention. Perfect. The rest of your outfit is selected around the trousers, of course. Everything else must support the line. Once dressed, you step out into the street. It's a particularly Victorian morning. Brisk but not sharp. Sunny but with a faint reminder that the fog is never far. The brick buildings cast long, dignified shadows, and the lamplighter's cart clinks faintly in the distance. Your boots tap a neat rhythm as you stroll toward the botanical gardens. Today's objective is simple. Walk just enough to warrant trousers. Inside the gardens, hedges are clipped to mathematical precision, and even the gravel on the paths seems swept with purpose. You pass a man feeding ducks and note, with quiet alarm, the visible knee sag in his trousers. Corduroy, likely unbrushed. You say nothing. This is not a day for confrontation. You take a seat on a discreet iron bench, pre-tested, of course, and enact the modified diagonal sit. One leg crosses gently at the ankle, the other extends forward, back straight. You maintain exactly 1 inch of air between bench and thigh crease. It's comfortable, in a way that would confuse the modern world. You open a book and begin to read, but your eyes wander. A young couple strolls past. He's wearing bright trousers, aggressively pressed, but the cut is too modern, too ambitious. You admire the effort, but flinch as he lunges forward to point at a squirrel, completely flattening the back crease in the process. You look back at your own knees, still proud, still defined. Historians still argue whether Victorian trousers were truly more resilient than today's, or whether their wearers were simply more cautious. One school of thought insists that the wool blends of the 19th century had a certain temperamental memory, like a cat who will return to your lap, but only if you pretend not to care. Others suggest it wasn't the fabric at all. It was the pace of life. People didn't rush, didn't sprawl. They transitioned between activities with the deliberation of actors between scenes. And their trousers? They held form accordingly. You walk a few more loops through the gardens before heading home. Back inside, you remove the flannels with the same solemnity with which you donned them. They've earned a rest. You brush the backs lightly, check for wear near the seams, and hang them with a whispered thank you. Not literally whispered, of course. Well, maybe just once. Then comes your final entry in the trousers journal for this week. Flannels executed beautifully. Good hold throughout walk. Observed decline in younger gents' crease discipline. Resisted urge to intervene. Growth noted. You close the journal and smile. There is peace in this kind of silliness. Quiet, elegant peace. The world may tilt and roar and demand urgency, but here, in this house, with this wardrobe, your days still hold their line. Now the light is fading. You dim the lamps. You pull your robe from the hook, brush a stray thread from the shoulder, and step into the kind of evening where the fire needs no stoking and the silence needs no filling. As you settle in for the night, book in lap, feet tucked beneath you, you think once more about what trousers mean. They're not armor, not quite, but they are a kind of contract between you and the world, a promise to maintain shape, even when life wants you to wrinkle. And with that thought, you turn the last page of your book, fold it closed, and breathe out. Your trousers are at rest. So are you. And now, with the day fully behind you, your house gently sighs around you. The lights are dimmed. The wardrobe stands silent and orderly, and your trousers, each pair, rest like faithful companions lined up and waiting for the next quiet journey. You move slowly through the room now, with soft feet and softer thoughts, letting the calm settle deeper in your chest. The worries of seams and folds, of pressing boards and fabric weights, fade to the corners of your mind, replaced with that deep, sleepy satisfaction that comes from caring just enough about the small things. Maybe tomorrow there will be a breeze, or a sudden tea invite, or a new pair arriving by post. But none of that is for now. Now, you've done your part. You've held your line. You've honored the crease. Your breath slows. The room grows still. You pull the covers up with a rustle like wind through linen. The night stretches ahead. gentle and wide, like a freshly made bed. No lines to fuss over, no folds to perfect. Just you, the dark, the quiet, and the knowledge that everything, for once, is hanging just right. Good night.